Story 1.
The last thing you expect at midnight is to hear a child knocking at your door. Especially in a quiet suburb where nothing ever really happens. I was half asleep, the TV still murmuring in the background, when the knock came. Slow, deliberate. Then a pause. And then a child's voice, small, shaky, whispering through the door. "Can I come in?" I froze. Because I don't have kids. And because no child should be alone at that hour, unless something had gone terribly wrong. It was late summer when it happened. I live in a small cul-de-sac about 30 minutes outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. Safe, suburban, the kind of neighborhood where everyone knows each other just enough to wave but not enough to meddle. I work remote tech support, so my hours are strange, and I tend to be up later than most of my neighbors. That night was quiet. Muggy. The air heavy with that end of August stillness. I just turned off my laptop and was making tea when I heard it. 3 knocks. Spaced out like someone unsure if they should continue. I thought maybe it was a package drop, though it was far too late for that. When I opened the curtain by the door, I expected to see nothing. Maybe a kid playing ding-dong ditch. But instead, standing directly in front of my storm door, was a boy. Couldn't have been older than 9. Wearing a red hoodie and blue shorts, barefoot. His hair looked wet, or greasy, I couldn't tell, and he was staring at the welcome mat like it was the only solid ground he trusted. "Hey," I said cautiously, not unlocking the door. "Are you okay?" He didn't look up. Just stood there, wringing his hands. "Can I come in?" he said, barely above a whisper. "Please. I don't know where I am." I asked where his parents were, where he lived. Still nothing. His lips trembled, but no tears came. "They told me to wait until it was dark." But I got scared. That line, "They told me to wait until it was dark," sat in my chest like a stone. It didn't sound like something a kid makes up on his own. It sounded rehearsed. Coached. I told him to wait, that I'd call the police to help him. That's when his expression changed. He looked up, finally, and his eyes filled with panic. "No police," he said sharply. "Please. Just let me in. I don't want them to know." Them. Who was them? I backed away and dialed 911, phone pressed to my ear while keeping one eye on him. I told the operator there was a child at my door, alone, distressed, possibly in danger. While I spoke, he didn't move. Just kept whispering something to himself under his breath. I couldn't make it out at first, until I pressed my ear closer to the door. "Don't tell them. Don't tell them. Don't tell them." Over and over. It chilled me in a way I can't explain. Because it didn't sound like a scared child. It sounded like someone trying to follow instructions. Like he was more afraid of what would happen if he didn't say it. When I asked the operator how long it would take for an officer to arrive, she said 10 minutes. I could already see the flashing lights in the distance before she finished the sentence. That's when the boy suddenly turned and sprinted down the street, not toward the lights, but away from them, and straight toward the alley between the neighboring houses. He vanished. By the time the cruiser arrived, there was no sign of him. The officer walked the block with me. We checked bushes, backyards, and behind fences. Nothing. I even pulled up the footage from my doorbell cam, but all it showed was him standing there. Not running. Not reacting. Just standing completely still for 6 minutes, frozen, like a statue. The footage didn't even show him leaving. That part disturbed me the most. The cop jotted down a report, said it was likely a runaway, possibly part of a domestic situation. "We get these sometimes," he said. "Kid gets dumped by someone who doesn't want to be found. They send them door to door, hoping someone panics. That sentence turned my stomach. It wasn't just the kid who was in danger. It was possible someone had used him. Someone nearby. Someone who watched to see who opened their door. I didn't sleep that night. I kept checking the backyard, turning lights on and off. Every little creak felt louder than usual. And every time I blinked, I could see his face, expressionless, waiting on my porch. The next day, I spoke with two neighbors. Neither of them had seen a thing. But one of them, an elderly woman who lived alone across the street, said something that stuck with me. She said she heard knocking too, around midnight. But she was too scared to answer. A week later, a neighbor's Ring camera picked up a man, tall, in a gray hoodie, lurking behind trash bins at the end of our street. He was never caught. But the police believed he might have been guiding the boy. Whatever that means. It's been almost 6 months. I still check my camera feed every night. I keep the porch light on, even though it doesn't make me feel safer. And I never, ever, open the door after dark. Not without checking, double-checking, and making sure someone knows I'm doing it. And sometimes, I find myself staring at the door, wondering, if I'd let that boy in, would I be here to tell this story? Or would I have ended up like the others, just another unsolved name on someone else's quiet, suburban street?
Story 2.
It was just past 11 p.m. when the knock came, slow, deliberate, too calm to be urgent. I just settled into bed with a book when it echoed through the hallway like it was inside the house. I wasn't expecting anyone. I live in a rural part of Oregon, with a gravel driveway long enough to discourage visitors. And yet, someone was at my door. When I opened it, a man stood there under the porch light, smiling faintly. And then he said something that chilled me deeper than any winter wind. "I know your secrets." I'd bought the house the year before, a modest cedar-sided place surrounded by pine forest, secluded and quiet. The kind of quiet that city folks crave, where the silence wraps around you like a heavy quilt. After a messy divorce and a burnout-level job exit, I'd needed the isolation. I thought nature and peace would give me space to rebuild. And for a while it did. Until the man showed up, and with him, a darkness I hadn't invited. The first night he appeared, I assumed he was confused or drunk. He didn't look homeless, clean clothes, well kept, but there was something off in his eyes. They didn't blink much, and they never really moved from mine. When he said, "I know your secrets," I laughed awkwardly and asked if he needed help. He didn't answer. Just stood there, hands at his sides, eyes locked on mine. After a long, unbearable silence, he said, "It's not safe to lie here." Then turned and walked back into the trees. I didn't sleep that night. The next day I checked the property. No tire marks, no signs of anyone on the long driveway. I installed motion lights and a trail cam. A part of me wondered if it was a dream, but the porch camera confirmed it. He'd been real. What the camera didn't catch was his face. The footage glitched just as he stepped into the light, distorting the frames. His figure warped, flickered, and then disappeared entirely. I checked for updates on the cam's firmware, but everything was normal. The tech just didn't want to show him. He came back a week later. This time, I didn't answer the door. I watched from the upstairs window, hidden behind the curtain. He didn't knock this time, just stood there, staring at the door for nearly 5 minutes. Then he looked up, right at my window. His lips moved like he was speaking, but I couldn't hear a thing. Still, I saw the words. Over and over. "I know your secrets." I dropped the curtain and backed away. When I looked again, he was gone. Just gone. A neighbor, the only one within shouting distance, told me later that a man had been seen lurking around other houses in the area too, but no one had gotten close enough to confront him. They thought he was casing homes. I wasn't so sure. There was something older, deeper, about this presence. Something that felt personal. I began hearing things inside the house. Not loud, just the kinds of sounds that tug at your attention. A creak where no weight should fall. A whisper in a room you haven't entered. The subtle scrape of something on wood. I checked every window, every door. Nothing was broken or pried open. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was already inside. Like he'd left something of himself behind. I started locking my bedroom door at night, not because I thought it would help, but because it gave me the illusion of control. Then came the notes. The first was tucked under a stack of firewood I'd left on the porch. White paper typed with only 3 words. Do they know? The second was slipped inside my mailbox, folded like a letter, but again no envelope. This one read, Secrets rot the soul. I brought them to the sheriff. He took them seriously, but there wasn't much he could do without catching the guy. Cameras hadn't helped. Descriptions were vague. And I had no idea who he was, or how he knew about my past. Because there were secrets. Things I hadn't told anyone. Not my ex-wife. Not my therapist. Not even my best friend. Things that happened years ago. Things that haunted me. It was like he pulled them out of the soil beneath the house. Like they'd seeped into the foundation and he just dug them up. Then he came to the back door. Not the front. Never again. This time, I was sitting in the living room when the back doorknob rattled gently. I froze, heart hammering. I crept toward the kitchen, holding my breath, and peeked around the corner. He was inside. Not fully, but leaning into the screen door, half his body in the kitchen. His face looked different this time, older, worn, almost like he was decaying. His eyes, though, were still the same, still fixed on me. He spoke softly. I can show them. All of it. I can make them see you. I stumbled backward, grabbed the poker from the fireplace. But by the time I got there, the door was wide open, and he was gone. No footsteps. No sound. Just the wind curling in behind him like it had followed him inside. I found something on the kitchen table that night. It hadn't been there before. A photograph. It was old, sun-warped, and water-damaged, but I recognized it instantly. It was me, 20 years younger, standing next to a man I hadn't thought about in over a decade. A man I'd once wronged. A man who'd disappeared not long after that photo was taken. And written on the back were 6 words. Secrets dig graves deeper than guilt. I started digging. Figuratively and literally. I searched public records, obituaries, old newspaper clippings. The man I remembered, the one in the photo, had never been found. But he had family in this area. A brother who used to work for the Forest Service. A cousin who was briefly institutionalized for claiming he'd seen his dead relatives walking in the woods. The pieces started falling into place. I hadn't killed the man, not directly. But I hadn't helped him when I could have. I'd left him behind, literally. On a back road in the Mojave, car broken down, phone dead. We'd argued, and I drove off. He was never seen again. I'd buried that memory. Told myself I didn't know what happened. That I wasn't responsible. But maybe something else believed I was. Maybe someone, or something, wanted me to remember. And now it stood at my door.
Story 3.
It was sometime past midnight when I heard the knock. Just 3 soft taps, almost polite. Not loud enough to startle, but unmistakable in the silence. The kind of sound that makes your ears question your mind, and your mind question your reality. I wasn't expecting anyone. I live alone, in the woods, a mile from the nearest road. No one should have been there, especially not at that hour. And yet, someone was. I'd moved into the cabin 6 months earlier after leaving city life behind. I wanted space, quiet, and a place to finally breathe again. What I didn't expect was that the silence would eventually start whispering back. The nights were always still, so still you could hear the wind brushing against the trees. But over time, I began to notice how that stillness seemed to shift. As if something, or someone, had begun sharing it with me. The first time it happened, I was sitting on the couch, nursing a cup of chamomile tea and reading. That's when I heard the knock. Just like before, 3 soft knocks, evenly spaced, deliberate. I froze. My heart didn't race, but it felt heavy, like it had sunk into my stomach. I waited, straining to listen. Nothing followed. I got up, slowly, and approached the door. The porch light flickered on as I opened it. There was no one there. Not a person. Not an animal. Not even the rustle of movement. Just the sharp scent of pine and the cold night air curling around my ankles. I stepped outside, scanning the tree line. It was dark, but I saw no shadows moving, no footprints in the soft soil. Just that same hush that now seemed heavier. I tried to shrug it off. Maybe a branch had tapped the door. Maybe the wind had tricked me. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like something had been waiting. The second time was a week later. Again, just after midnight. 3 knocks, perfectly spaced. I didn't even hesitate this time. I rushed to the door and flung it open, half expecting to catch someone fleeing. But once again, nothing. I walked the perimeter of the cabin with a flashlight. No tracks. No signs of life. Not even a deer or raccoon. It was as if the forest had swallowed the night whole. I told myself I was being paranoid. But something in my gut told me otherwise. After the 3rd time, I set up a camera. It wasn't anything fancy. Just a motion-triggered trail cam I strapped to one of the porch beams, aimed directly at the front door. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not that I had many people to tell. I just needed to know I wasn't imagining things. That I wasn't slowly unraveling in my little paradise. The 4th knock came 3 days later. I was already awake when I heard it. Something had stirred me just minutes before. This time, I didn't move. I just sat there in the dark, staring at the door, heart pounding, listening to every creak and breath of the house. I waited a full 5 minutes before checking the footage, and what I saw made my skin turn to ice. The timestamp matched the knock perfectly. I could see the porch, the door, the shadows from the trees. But there was no figure, no hand, no source of the knocking. Just the door, gently vibrating, as if something invisible had tapped it. I replayed it over and over. There was no glitch. No wind strong enough to cause it. Just that rhythmic, measured movement. I should have left then. I really should have. But the knock wasn't meant for me. At least, not originally. It was 2 weeks later when I met my neighbor, Alan. He lived across the ridge, maybe half a mile through the woods. We bumped into each other at the general store in town. He noticed the propane tank in my truck bed and asked if I was the one living in the old Harper place. We got to talking, and eventually, I brought up the knocks. He went quiet. Real quiet. Then he told me something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. He'd heard them too. At his place. Same time. Same rhythm. 3 slow taps. He said it started for him last winter. He thought it was just some prank at first, until he found the dead crows on his porch. 5 of them, lined up perfectly, beaks pointing toward the door. Alan believed it was tied to the land. Something old. Something forgotten. I didn't want to believe him. But then the knocking changed. It came earlier one night, around 10 p.m. I was in the kitchen when I heard it. But this time, it wasn't just 3 knocks. It was followed by a faint, wet dragging sound, like something being pulled across the porch boards. I grabbed a flashlight and flung open the door, half screaming into the woods. Still nothing. Except the camera caught it. This time, there was something there. Just at the edge of the porch light's reach, barely visible. A shape, low to the ground, almost crawling. Its limbs too long, too thin. The way it moved wasn't human. Not quite animal either. It reached out, long fingers curling toward the door, but never touched it. And then, it vanished. Frame by frame, I watched it dissolve into shadow. No noise. No footprints. Just gone. I stayed up the entire night, every light in the cabin on. The next day, I went to Alan's place. His house was dark. Windows boarded up. No sign of him. I haven't seen him since. It's been 3 months now. The knocking has stopped. But I don't think it's over. Some nights, I still feel it, the weight of someone on the porch. A shadow shifting just out of sight. I've moved the camera, replaced it twice. It hasn't caught anything since. And yet, I still wait. Still listen. Because once you hear that knock, once you know something is out there, pretending to be invited in, you never forget. So if you ever hear 3 soft knocks at your door in the middle of the night, don't open it. Not unless you're ready for what comes next.